Very special guest with us, the great Chris Sylvester. And Chris, I will always know you as the voice of Cal Poly. I know you're off doing bigger and better things, but I know you love the Mustangs and you love living in San Luis Obispo. So those are two real positive things. Thanks for giving us a couple minutes.
I didn't even wear this on purpose. I just
Yeah.
I've got a Cal Poly shirt on, and it's like half of my wardrobe now. You'd think I was an alum, but no, I appreciate you having me on, man. I love I'm from down south, man. I grew up in
Yeah.
Long Beach, and
Bosco,
uh,
baby.
yeah,
Yeah.
man. So I grew up in the Southland, man, but I really feel some type of way about Slow and Cal Poly especially. They've been really good to me over the years, and man, kind of hard to believe, but I'm coming up on I think my 10th season being involved with Cal
Wow.
Poly, which
That's
is just
awesome.
yeah. Fall of 2016 is when I took over for the great Tom Barquette. So
Yeah.
anyway, no, I
And you're and
appreciate
you're
you.
and you're only 24. No, I'm kidding.
I wish.
You bring up the gear, and it's funny. I'm sitting in front of my dresser here. I got a whole closet at Northridge. Because just over the years they give you stuff and you accumulate it. It's great on road trips. Because
It
you don't have
really
to
is.
worry about you just throw all the stuff into your bag on a road trip, and you go out and you got t-shirts and long sleeve t-shirts and sweatshirts and hoodies and pullovers. So it's helpful during the season for sure. It's helpful. You never have to think about what to wear. So. Little inside baseball on being like a broadcaster for a team, you know.
Again, I mean, it just like I walk around town with this stuff on, and people ask me, "Oh, did you go to Cal Poly? Do you go to Cal Poly?" Well, I work there, kind
Yeah,
of, sort of.
yeah, yeah. Um, yeah, I do want to give you props. You're doing a lot of national stuff on the basketball side. I think you did a linear national baseball game too. So just really shout out. I know how you grind. I know you're doing you're like doing a game every day. They have those documentaries, like 30 churches in 30 days. You're like 30 stadiums in 30 days, and you've been doing it for a long time. And so, I want people to understand that this doesn't happen by accident. But to touch on the topic I want to discuss today, and it's become come to the forefront. And it's funny, a lot of the political stuff that's going on in our country kind of made me think about this in relation to sports. I think everybody can relate. Um, you and I have both in recent years covered teams that have struggled. On the basketball side, CSUN had a rough run for a little bit. Cal Poly had a little bit of a rough run, and I thought you did a great job managing it. You're really good at building relationships with coaches, and that's part of it. But I mean, give me. I'll have some questions for you, but give me some tidbits. So Cal Poly is struggling in basketball for like about a 3 or 4 year stretch. How are you dealing with that day in, day out? 'Cause I know you were doing the ESPN Plus stuff, but for a while you were traveling with the team too, Chris. How do you deal with that?
Yeah, man, it's incredibly difficult because, I mean, like you said, when you travel with the team like that, you feel like you're a part of the team. You feel like you're a part of the program. So when you're on that type of level with the team, the wins and losses they hit differently. Like you feel the magnitude of a loss because you're around those guys on a bus after they gave their all for 40 minutes of a basketball game, only to come up short by a handful of points. So it's really tough to stay positive, especially like you said when it's year after year, right? It's one thing to have just a bad season, right? Everybody has
Yeah.
a bad season, whether it be injuries or a rebuild, especially at the mid-major level. I mean, you're going to have a lot of rebuilding seasons for these programs that don't have the NIL money that some of these
Hmm.
bigger programs do. But man, I mean, it's not easy, and I think with Cal Poly and the struggles they've had, and you really look back at it, man. I mean, like Cal Poly in a little over 3 decades of their Division One history, they only have like 5 or 6 winning seasons in men's basketball. So it was a big struggle in terms of like not being able to get out of the basement there for 3 or 4 years, but really for my entire tenure covering the program, even Joe Calero's last few years. I mean, they were it's kind of teetering on the bottom of the Big West standings, and a guy like Joe, and it's really interesting. My first year calling games for Cal Poly, I wasn't sure what type of approach to take on social media. Like I wanted to be supportive of Cal Poly, I wanted to pull for them, but I also wanted to give the stats and I wanted to give the
Right.
facts. And I
Credibility.
remember,
Credibility.
yeah, and that we had a game where Cal Poly was on like a 9 game losing streak, and they were playing a red hot Long Beach State team. And I tweeted something along the lines of, Cal Poly, they're only averaging 57 points per game during the losing streak. Meanwhile, Long Beach, they've won six straight. They're averaging 85. That means the Mustangs are going to need to find some offense tonight to have a chance. And I, someone from the team kind of pulled me aside before the game and said, hey, you can't be putting stuff like that out there. And so I think that was like a big turning point for me and just kind of realizing, okay, like I'm in a sense, a marketing tool for this program. I can't really put out the negatives, even if they are factual, right? I think
Right.
that's the things about numbers. It's like if a guy, and trust me, I've dealt with this before, but if a guy's like 2 for 25 from 3-point range on the season, it's hard not to say, well, you'll pay him to shoot it. No wonder they're leaving him open. But there's
Yeah.
different ways. There's different ways you have to say it, and you also have to realize, and this was something I kind of learned early on too, in trying to develop relationships with players. Now, these guys are, take Kobe Sanders, who was just drafted, by the
Yeah.
way, by the LA Clippers, 50th overall, doing pretty well with their summer league, and he played 4 years at Cal Poly. His winning percentage probably wasn't north of 200. Like he probably lost 80% of the games, if not more, that he played in a Cal Poly uniform, but he stuck it out. He got better year by year, but I remember him as a freshman. I remember really kind of hammering on the air that he was struggling, and I could tell the few conversations I had with him after the fact. Maybe he took a little bit of exception to that, but as I got to know him over the years and grow over the years, and as he got better over the years, I think he kind of looked back and realized kind of what I was saying and what I was trying to portray on the air. Sometimes these guys have potential. It's just the results aren't there during the game. So I think an important piece of it is maybe kind of bringing to light some of the things that the fans don't see, right? Like some
Yeah.
of the things that these guys are working at during shoot around, some of the things that they're working at practice day to day. And I think attending those and like you said, traveling with the team, so you're almost kind of forced to go to a lot of that stuff and be in some of those meetings and overhear some of those conversations. I think not that a fan base is going to be all that patient, but I think the benefit of being at a West Coast mid major like Cal Poly or CSUN, it's not there's not going to be this overwhelming pressure from a fan base, or
Yeah.
they're not going to be more than like 10 people angry tweeting you and telling you to fire the coach and that you're
Yeah.
sugarcoating it too much. But I'll tell you this, and somebody told me this a long time ago, but whenever the winning comes around, and I know it has for you guys during times of your tenure at CSUN, especially in hoops and more recently for Cal Poly, at least this last year, just kind of showing a little bit of promise and making the Big West tournament semis. But I feel like when you call a team that struggles for such a long time and then they have a little bit of a turnaround, you're almost better prepared to call the better moments because you've been sitting waiting on them for such a long time. Whereas, if you're so used to winning and then you run into a tough season, I feel like it's easier to go from losing to winning as far as, when you call a team's game. So I try to keep it positive, but I also can't leave out the facts. Like there were
Yeah.
so many years with me at Cal Poly where they were a bottom 10 points per game scoring offense in the country. And I had to bring light to that. I mean,
Yeah.
you got to score the ball to win games. And John Smith, who's still a good friend of mine, he didn't have the tenure here that we talked about this on a
Yeah.
podcast last year
Yeah.
after the coaching change. He didn't have the tenure here that we all wanted him to. But one thing about John was that John always appreciated. I called 70 the magic number for him. His record when the team was held under 70. It was a note I'd always give out, and I think maybe towards the end there I stopped giving it out because it was a little egregious. But he had a bad record when his team scored under 70, but he had an over 500 record when his team scored over 70.
Yeah.
So I think just kind of peppering in stuff like that. I mean it helps, but it's not easy, man. It wears on you. I mean it's stressful. Like there's been some seasons, Gazal, where like I love calling games and I never get tired of showing up to a stadium, to a venue to call a game, but there's some seasons there where we're grinded down February. We know we're not making the conference tournament, and part of me
Yeah.
is just wants it to be over because I feel for those guys and I know how hard they fight. And sometimes you're just overmatched. Sometimes it's not
Yeah.
X's and O's. Sometimes it's Jimmy's and Joe's.
Yeah. That's the balance. It's interesting what you brought up about the tweet. I wonder if you'd left off Long Beach State and just said, "Hey, Mustangs averaging 57 points over their last six games. going in, going into the pyramid, offense needs to step off. If that would have been okay, I wonder if including Long Beach's 80, whatever, would they? But you know what? I'm with you because I had this conversation of all people with Jim Herrick, and it was a really great. I wish I'd recorded it. It's a great conversation about um, now everybody can watch every game. Okay, with all the streaming platforms, everybody can watch every game. So if you're trying to gild the lily, then you lose credibility. Now, I'm not saying, oh man, this team's horrible, this team stinks. You don't do that, but you have to kind of present what the reality is. And I
Right.
remember I watched Ethan Hawke, it was the actor, talked about transitioning from being an actor to being a writer to being a director, and he said he got this advice from Denzel Washington. And he goes, you really have to understand your audience and you have to respect your audience and you have to perform, direct whatever you do as if the audience is knowledgeable and intelligent. Because if you talk down to the audience or try to fool the audience, it's always going to come out and you're going to be the one that looks bad. And that was the conversation I had with Coach Herrick. I remember him telling me this, that he didn't like when everything started to get televised. He goes, oh, when the cable started happening, that bothered me a little bit. But then he said, then I realized something. I realized that puts the officials now. The officials now, everybody can see what's going on. So that actually helps me because now it's again, and Chris Roberts, the late Chris Roberts, as you know, is a mentor of mine, and he worked with Coach Herrick for a long time. And I remember him telling me this, that you get to know all these people, and when you're winning national championships, it's really good, and it's UCLA and it's a big brand. But like you're saying, mid-major guys like you and me, of course, we're friends with the coaches, we're friends with the players, we know all the parents, we want them to do well, but at the same time, we're trying to develop credibility so we can move maybe up to a different job or do kind of what you're doing when you're doing, when you're not doing Cal Poly, you're doing national stuff, and you can't do that. I mean, back in the day, I guess you could be a complete homer and be everybody be fine with it. You mentioned the weird tweets. I remember when I first started working with CSUN, Reggie Theus was the head coach. I remember there are these two guys, big super fans that would interact with me a lot, and one of them was convinced that Theus had me in his pocket and one of them thought I was being too critical. So, I feel like we're Vegas, right? We just need to have action on both sides. If half the
Exactly.
if half the audience thinks you don't like the team and half the audience thinks you like the team, you're in good shape. But it's a delicate balance because there's I was always taught you're judged by what goes out over the air. There's what goes out over the air, and there's also what goes on when you're at practice, when you're on the road, when you're on the bus, when you're on the plane. I do want to ask you, you mentioned John Smith, who I'm a big fan of. John's a great guy, and I've always thought he was a great coach, regardless of what happened at Cal Poly. It just didn't work out. You did a post game with him, so for people who don't know, John Smith is from Riverside, California. He played high school basketball in Riverside, played for a minute at UNLV with Tark, and then went and finished up, I think, at D2 playing for his brother. And then he won a state championship at Riverside City College, junior college, before he was an assistant at Cal State Fullerton and all that stuff. And then he got the job at Cal Poly. So they're at Riverside, and it's his hometown. Everybody who knows him's in the building, and they get run. I mean, I think about a 30-point loss. I happened to be at home. I think I think CSUN wasn't playing that day. It was a bye, and I had been out like to play or a movie or something. I came back, caught the end of your broadcast, and I caught the post game. And Chris, that was one of the best. I mean, I wish you. That's why because of you, I podcast all my pre and post games now because I don't want to miss a moment like you had. And John was like emotional, and you were so great with him. You were like Judd Hirsch and Ordinary People, or you're like Lorraine Bracco on The Sopranos. It's almost like you were reeling him in about, hey, okay, this is one game, and the way you approached it, this is one game. What are we taking out of this? And he was just so, hey, Chris, we're going to get it right. We're working hard. We're going to get it right. That to me, that was your relationship with John, which if you wouldn't mind, I'd like to go into a little bit because I do think that colors how you cover games. No.
Absolutely. And I'll openly admit I was way closer to John than I ever was with Joe Calero than I currently am with Mike DeGeorge, right?
Right.
I think part of it's timing, right? Like, you know, um, John had gotten the job right before COVID hit, 5 or 6 months before the COVID season. And so he was an easy guy to root for. I kind of felt bad for him because I think he wasn't a sexy hire. He wasn't a home run hire. I mean, you're a Big West school and you take a Big West assistant coach, right? I mean, everyone wants a Power Five assistant coach, or in Mike DeGeorge's case, you get a D2 coach that's had a lot of success at that level. Well, John Smith, and it was widely reported that Rod Palmer, longtime Long Beach State UCLA assistant, was the number one choice, and he didn't take the job. I've never gotten 100% confirmation whether or not like Rod Palmer was ever like the number one choice that offseason. I've heard some people say yes, some people say no. Regardless of what that situation was, I always, yeah, I mean, you do at times kind of have to talk coaches down from ledges,
Yeah.
like you said, they beat themselves up over games. And for John, I'm sure he was embarrassed after that first trip back to Riverside. John was a runner-up for the Riverside job before he got the Cal Poly job, and he openly he told me about that, and it would have made sense, right? I mean,
Yeah.
you mentioned the championship in Riverside. I think he's like a RCC Hall of Famer or JUCO basketball coach Hall of Famer in the state of California. So, he was a terrific just coach, like for me as a broadcaster, to help build my confidence. Not only did he believe in me to tell the story of his teams, but he always gave me the real. He always told me what was going on. I'll never forget my first year with Cal Poly, and I'll go quick on this, but Joe Calero and the team, and I'm mind you, they like you said, I mean, I wish I was 24 right now, but they hired me when I was like 19, so like I was 20 years old. I'm not even able to grab a drink with anybody after the game legally my
Right.
first year, and we're up in Berkeley and we're about to go play Cal, and Givo, the SID, and I are making our way from our hotel that we shared down to the bus, and I completely blanked. I brought my backpack with me, but as you know, at this level, we got to bring the gear. We got to
Yeah.
bring the radio gear to set up. And I was so embarrassed that, and we were one of the first people on the bus, but I was so embarrassed that I had left the gear in the room. I didn't say anything. I didn't say anything. I left the bus like real quick, just thought I was going to sneak off. Come back, the bus is gone. they, they left without me.
Yeah.
That's Calero. That's how Calero rolled, man. He said like we have a sharp out time. If you're not here, you're not here. So I literally I grabbed a taxi. Like I didn't call an Uber or anything. I grabbed a taxi and raced from Oakland over to Berkeley. And I saw Calero before the game, and I was a little embarrassed. I was like, "Hey, coach, good luck tonight." And he just kind of gave me like that. Like he knew I missed the bus, and it was this whole thing and whatnot. And so and then I have to interview him after that game, and it kind of made me feel like as small as an ant. Like I was embarrassed, and I mean, I was young, immature, lack of professionalism, call it what you will. But when John came in, there was just like he helped me kind of get to the next level of broadcasting just with how transparent he was with that
Yeah.
information. And I know you've had some really cool coaches that you've worked with as well that have also been transparent. And it's a lot easier to tell the story, even if a team's struggling, if you can be a little transparent about, hey, here's what happened. I mean, we had years where we had guys kicked off due to academic issues. We didn't throw them under the bus publicly and say
Right.
that they flunked out of school, but we
Right.
said that they violated team rules and team
Yeah.
policy. And so just having that openness, and especially going through, I mean, I don't know, and I hope we never go through anything like COVID again in our lifetimes, but
Right.
just going through that and how tough that was on the kids and how tough that was on the coaches, to just have the limited time and the lack of recruiting visits and stuff like that. I just felt like the timing of John being here and where I was in my career at that time just really was a perfect mesh. And I mean, I'm to this day, it just feels like unfinished business with Smitty's tenure up here. But I mean, having that type of relationship with a coach as a broadcaster just really can help you feel like you're painting the entire picture and not leaving stuff out, because there, as you know, man, there's a lot of coaches that are very tight-lipped about things and don't want things to get out there, and don't, quite frankly, don't want anybody to know about anything. And here you are sitting, and I'm sure there's a few people that know the real, but you don't even know the real, and you're kind of giving a version on the air where you've got a few people watching and listening, and maybe knowing some stuff that you don't. And for me, and
Yeah.
I'm sure you're the same way, you don't ever want to be, it's inevitable sometimes, right? But you don't ever want to be calling a game and have somebody on the other end of it listening or watching feel like they know more about the situation, the storyline, the
Right.
game, the team than
Right.
you do. You
Right.
have to be the ultimate expert.
Especially our level. Real quick, you mentioned pre and post game when a team is struggling. what's some advice you can give maybe a broadcaster? Hey, how do you handle the pregame? How do you handle the postgame? So you're doing a pregame. The team's lost 7 in a row, Chris. How do you handle that?
Yeah, I mean, new day, new opportunity, right? Just a kind of a chance to hit the reset button. I mean, usually when a team's even on a losing streak, you can point to some things that have gone right. Well, they haven't scored the basketball well, but man, their defense has kept them in these games. I mean, if they don't go 3 of 21 from the perimeter, they go 5 of 21 instead, they win that game. So I think you try to point out things, and then it is a team sport at the end of the day. But I mentioned Kobe Sanders. Kobe Sanders averaged like 20 points a game when Cal Poly went 0-20 in the Big West. So, and he got some money to go to Nevada, and now he's going to be playing in the NBA. So there's still some silver linings, I call them, right?
Okay.
There's still some silver linings to take away from a losing team, and there's still some feel good stories. I mean, there's still milestones for individuals to approach, and but it's tough, man. It's tough. After a while, I mean, look what we just went through. And just broke earlier this calendar year. What was that crazy 40 some odd Big West losing streak? I remember
Yeah.
I was so befuddled. We had lost at home to Davis. Davis was okay this year. We actually beat them, and I say we. Cal Poly beat them in the Big West tournament this year.
Hmm.
But I remember that I think that was the last or second to last loss. And unfortunately, I wasn't even. You were texting me during that. I wasn't even
Yeah.
on the call. I wasn't
Right.
even on the call the day they got off the schneid there. But
Yeah.
man, I just remember signing off that game, and I said something along the lines of, "Well, we'll get back into the win column eventually." And that's as much as I'll let it bleed out on the air. But that was the one where I just thought maybe they'd never win a Big West game again because they, I just thought they were so much better than Davis, and
Yeah.
and they just, Jim Les, man, he's the Mad Hatter.
Post game,
Post,
teams
yeah,
on a
po
teams on a losing
yeah.
streak. They have a 12-point lead with about 5 minutes to go. End up losing the game. How do you handle that?
Honestly, I keep it short. I keep it
Yeah.
short, especially when it's repetitive after a while, right?
Right.
And it might come across as phony if I keep asking the same question. So I learned after situations like that, like two question max, how do you flush this one? How do where do
Yeah.
you switch the focus? Did you like anything you saw tonight?
Yeah. Yeah.
Like what,
I
so.
always, I always with Trent Johnson, who won 14 games in 2 years. It was always, hey, coach, give me a quick assessment, and then I would ask one specific question. And he was always a big defense guy, and he always believed if you play defense right, you'll be in the game. Like I said, well, what obviously you feel what went wrong defensively, and normally he would answer, but a couple of times said, you know what? He actually said, no, we actually were okay on defense. Offensively, we didn't do this X, Y, and Z. So, and then you give credit to the other team, which can get you in trouble as well sometimes.
But what's unique about your situation and the guys you've worked with at CSUN, they've all coached at higher levels and had some sort of semblance of success at a higher level. So I'd almost wonder, like, how often did you ask these coaches if they had dealt with something like this at a previous stop?
I mean, me and Trent got pretty deep because we would talk before and after games, and he wasn't always great on the air, but like you're saying, he was a transparent guy. He'd been through it all. One of the funny story I have when I worked with Mark Gottfried, I was still getting to know him. It was the first year, and they actually been playing pretty well. They'd lost a close game to New Mexico to start the season, and then had been okay. Then they came home and they got blown out by a not a good Sac State team. So I don't really know Mark at this point. I'm just kind of getting to know him. I think it might have been the sixth or seventh game in, and I'm trying to not, obviously, it was a bad performance, and I'm going to get to that, but I always kind of start off with a little bit of sunshine, right? And if Mark says to me something to the effect of, hey, I appreciate you trying to be positive. We stunk today. When we stunk, coaching stunk, the playing stunk, the this stunk, and we're gonna address it, but we just weren't very good today. I'm like, okay, that just and that's he'd been a broadcaster, he'd been at Alabama, he'd been at North Carolina State, he'd been an assistant at UCLA. That's a guy understanding that what I'm not going to gild the lily. I'm not going to BS you. We weren't good, but it's November 15th or whatever. It's early in the season, so I'm gonna, like you're saying, I'm gonna flush this aside and move forward. Um, but before we let you go, and I thank you for giving me a few minutes, Chris. I know you're a busy guy overall, and again, congratulations on all your success. And I hope to see you on the road this year over at Cal Poly. Um, what is some advice you can give, like an up and coming broadcaster? You're working for a team. What are two or three things they really need to do to build alliances, to build relationships?
Yeah, I would make it a point to at some juncture or another try to sit down and talk with everybody involved, right? Not just the players and coaches, but And I think it's something you've posted about. I mean, wasn't there a student manager at CSUN that's gone on to do some pretty big things in
Isaac
the
Jacob, he's the head coach for the Pacers summer league team. Yeah,
that's pretty cool, man.
isn't it? And
That's a pretty
I got to shout out Devontae Morris. He's in the front office of the Golden State Warriors. He has a championship ring. So Devontae, but you're my man. I got to shout that one out too. But
well,
yeah,
I mean, yeah, that's a meteoric rise if you think about it. So I think it's interesting to talk from everybody on the end of the bench to everybody that's in the starting five to, alums if you see them at games.
yeah,
I'm not a big, hey, I want to talk to every single fan, right? Because if
right,
you, that's an interesting rabbit hole to kind of open up because then all of a sudden the fans think they have access and then they'll, ask if they can come on the air, stuff
yeah,
like that. But no, I think the really important part about covering a team is really just developing that trust. I think there needs to be trust. And I think early, like I told you with some of my stories with Calero and his time at Cal Poly, there wasn't a ton of trust. And I don't blame him for not trusting me, being a new guy coming into his program. There's almost that sense of like, Mike DeGeorge and I are still getting to know each other,
yeah,
albeit not on the same level because I don't travel with the team anymore. But I really think it's important to just do whatever you can to make them feel comfortable. Like
yeah,
you need to make the players and coaches feel comfortable because that's how you're going to get the most out of them, and that's how you're going to develop your skills as a storyteller because people can read about the stories that everybody knows, like the stuff in the bio online, right? Like the basic prep.
yeah,
But if you can really sit down next to the bus on the bus with somebody, and there are some long bus rides when you call games at a school like Cal Poly. I mean, our closest opponent's 2 hours away.
right,
So I think that's the big key, man, is just get comfortable and ask for some time outside of a practice. Ask for a lunch, ask for a coffee. It doesn't, I mean, it might be hard to do with everybody on the team, especially student athletes, but definitely the coaches and just try to earn their trust. See what their background is. See if they have a family member that's a constant listener or something like
yeah.
that. I think it's just really important to build that trust to be able to get the most out of the role.
Yeah, and the art of it, and again, Chris, thanks for giving us a few minutes. The art of it is, uh, to me, is being part of a team as a broadcaster is definitely something, right? And I remember talking to Rich Cellini years ago. He'd been the voice of USF, and I then done Cal for a little bit, and he was doing the Pac-12 Network at the time, and we had a nice conversation. And he told me, and this is not, I miss being part of a team because you're following, like you're saying, as a storyteller, when you're following the narrative, and I think that's something you're dealing with now because you're obviously still the voice of Cal Poly, but you're doing all these national things, and you're good at what you do. You do your homework, but there's nothing like the relationship you build day to day with the team. And I don't know about you, you're younger than I am, but when I watch, I'm disappointed, kind of, not that the like NBA playoffs that recently wrapped up, right? The national guys are amazing. Breen is amazing. Brian Anderson's amazing. But there's nothing like when you watch the people who are, like the Lakers or the Clippers, whoever you follow, who are doing it day to day to day. Now a couple of the guys that because Breen was the Knicks guy and Ian Eagle was the Nets guy when I was coming up. And so, like, I listened to them day to day to day, and now they're at the national level. It's a little bit different. Um, Thoughts on being part of a team? You touched on it a little bit. What are the advantages to a broadcaster when you're following a team day to day to day? Like two or three main things that you found.
Yeah, I mean, and I kind of miss it too. I mean, there's circumstantial things that kind of prevented me from continuing to do it. But man, I mean, beyond just getting comfortable with those guys, I think trying to be yourself around them, which is something I was always, I didn't want to make right because it's not about me, right?
No,
So
no,
I never wanted to be like that in front of the guys. But there was all you got to find a happy medium. I also found myself early on when I was traveling with the teams, kind of hanging around in the corner and not initiating enough
right.
conversations because
Yes.
I was too worried. I was too worried about
Yeah.
being too much of a distraction there. And so we had a chance to go to Hawaii with the men's basketball team during COVID, and remember we used to play those back-to-back games,
Right. Well, that's
and
great. Yeah.
yeah, and so
Not
one thing
COVID
about
was COVID. COVID wasn't great, but being in the same
no,
city for 4 days to call
yes.
two games was pretty good.
Well, and we played Hawaii on a Friday, Saturday, and Sunday was Super Bowl Sunday, and we were scheduled to be flying back to California on that Sunday, and the coaching staff decided that, you know what, let's fly back Monday. Let's rent out a ballroom or whatever at the hotel we were staying at. And we all watched the game and we got food together, and that was just an opportunity away from basketball to just kind of see what these guys are like. And I think that's unique, man. I think it's
Yeah.
unique to tell the story of a basketball player that maybe, just loves football, like loves watching football more than anything else. I think that's a unique story. But again, it's really rare when you're, like you said, it's really rare when you're not a team guy to get the appropriate amount of time with the athletes, with the coaches, to really be able to paint the picture and tell the whole story. I could tell you as a sports fan myself too. Anytime I have an option between watching my team's guys or the national broadcast, with all due respect to the national broadcast, because there's a ton of national play-by-play guys and color analysts that I love and that I try to emulate after bits and pieces of, but there's nothing like, you know, being with the guys that have been through every preseason game practice, every regular season practice, and so on and so forth into the regular season. It's so difficult to jump in when you haven't covered a team all year and feel like you're really an expert the way you would be if you cover a team. So if you do cover a team, I just think to try to hammer that as much as possible. But in that same breath, like you said, not being a homer is also really important too. I understand that if I'm the radio guy of one team, I'm probably not going to get a lot of face value from the opposing team's coach. But having a conversation with you, you call games for the team. That's why we go up and talk to each other before we
Right.
call these
Right.
games, because
Right.
I probably have two or three things that you don't know, and you probably have two to three things that I don't know. And
Yeah.
so I think that's really important too, is to, as much as you feel like you're part of it, you can't get too sucked in. Like when you're on the air, you got to have a limit there
Yeah.
where
You're calling a
where
game. Yeah.
yeah, you're calling a game. And
Yeah.
in this ESPN Plus world, as you know, when Cal Poly goes down that way and plays at Premier Credit, what it used to be the Matadome. I'm
Yeah.
always going to call it the Matadome,
Yeah.
but the old Matadome, you know that you're going to get the bulk of Cal Poly fans watching your stream,
Right. Right.
and the last thing, the last thing you want to do is not know as much about Cal Poly as you do CSUN. So
Yeah.
you try to find that happy medium, but there's a lot of fun that comes with being a part of a team. No question.
And then just to wrap, I think we have about 5 minutes left to wrap up here. The ESPN Plus age, right? So, I mean, for people who don't know, basically in the Big West at least, the home teams produce the ESPN Plus feed. So when Cal Poly plays at CSUN, it's our feed. And then when CSUN plays at Cal Poly, Chris will be on the feed and they'll produce it up there. See, for whatever reason, the CSUN administration has seen fit to send me and out on the road to do an audio broadcast. Cal Poly, you guys still do a full radio broadcast with Max Kelton. Oh, it's
I
done?
wish. I
Oh, is it
wish.
over?
Yeah, that's yeah, it's tough. Yeah, they're I tried, man. I tried to keep them around, but they unfortunately, yeah, very very unfortunate.
So no more road. So football, no road games as well.
It's ridiculous in my opinion. You're a Division I football program, you got to have a radio guy. And I pitched, hey, let's just do streaming like you guys do. You guys aren't on AM FM
No,
down there,
we're
right?
not. We're not.
And it's easier to access online than it is AM FM. It really is. There's a
Yeah.
lot of hoops to jump through. So, unfortunately, no. I do want to try to pitch it to where they do football and conference tournaments because, I mean, come on, man. You clinch like Cal Poly baseball did. You clinch a chance to go to the NCAA tournament. You got to have the home team
You
call,
got to
man.
have your guy on there. Yeah, yeah, yeah. No, it's oh wow. So sorry, we broke a little news today. I'm sorry about that. Didn't mean to do that to you.
No, it's
So
okay.
so are we expect you back on Cal Poly next year, Chris?
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. I want to keep dabbling in Cal Poly until I literally can't anymore. I mean, I love living here on the Central Coast and love doing as many home games as I can. So,
All right, my friend. Hey, I appreciate you giving us a couple minutes. I think it's an interesting topic. And to finish up my point on the ESPN Plus, it's weird now because I think a lot of people, you and I have been around, so we have a little bit of credibility with our audience and our administration, but I think people sometimes are afraid to step too far and they won't, and that's you brought that up earlier when we've been around a point where we know some of the coaches and they'll tell us stuff from other teams. Well, just out of friendliness, they'll tell us stuff. And then you watch a broadcast and clearly that has not been communicated to the whoever the broadcaster is for that side. And it's like, hey, it's a great perk because you can say it. And I think you and I have exchanged stuff where, hey, Chris, this is public, so feel free to jump in on this. And I think you've told me the same stuff with it. Before I leave you, though, I do want to give your coach a compliment. And I love the Georgia system. Obviously, had a lot of great success when I met Mike. I introduced myself and I said, Coach, great to meet you. And he said, please, it's Mike. It just tells you all you need to know about how cool a guy Mike DeGeorge is. And I wish him success. Wrapping up, final thought, Chris Sylvester, about covering a struggling team. What do we need to do?
Ooh, find some happiness, find some joy, man. Find some joy within it. Like have some fun with it. Like because our goal at the end of the day, we can't change the results of the games. We can't suit up and get out there and try to be the 12th man or the sixth man. So I think it's to try to kind of almost be a distraction. Isn't that crazy? We're calling a game, but we're trying to be a distraction for a game because our goal is to keep people tuned in. How do we keep people tuned in when we know our team's not going to win when they're down 20 with 3 minutes left? How do you do that? Do you have some fun with the walk-ons that get a little bit of time? Do you start to look ahead and say, hey, that might be a favorable matchup for us? You have to find ways to keep people logged in, to keep people on the play button and not the X in the top left corner. So that's my thing, man. I mean,
All right.
no matter how poorly your team is performing and playing and dealing with the losing streak, you have to keep your audience tuned in one way or the other. And even if you have to start a quirky little segment in the final 10 minutes of the game because it's that bad, you got to do it.
Hey, Chris, thanks a lot. Next time you're in LA, let me know. We'll grab a slice of pizza or a burger or something.
That sounds amazing.
That's Chris Sylvester. He's the voice of Cal Poly.